Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining myself, Sophie Parrott, a journalist at HR Grapevine, today for an HR Grapevine and SmartRecruiters webinar titled Digital Transformation, How to Create a Future-Proof Talent Acquisition Strategy. With a wealth of research suggesting that talent attraction and recruitment plays a huge role in the success of an organisation, it's really crucial that talent acquisition leaders carve out a strategy that can sustain the business going forwards. So this webinar will provide information on those talent acquisition leaders, either wanting to know how to succeed in their talent tech transformation and also how to measure its success, as well as discussions surrounding the tools and integrations that should perhaps be considered when rolling out talent tech. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Symons, who is the Senior Vice President of EMEA at SmartRecruiters, and also Mo Karim, who is a business transformation consultant. The pair will be able to give you more information and insights and also provide concrete examples regarding this topic. So throughout the duration of the webinar, please use the question function to put forward any questions that you might have for either Rob or Mo, and I'm sure at the end of the session they'll be happy and able to answer. There will also be the opportunity for you to become involved in a poll throughout the course of the webinar, and we will give more details as and when that comes up. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over directly to Rob, who will be able to discuss this topic further.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sophie, and welcome everybody. Thanks for finding the time to join this webinar. I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to myself and then hand over to Mo, and then we'll get into the topics. So from my perspective, I've had about 25 years in HR. I spent 7 years as a IT sort of specialist recruiter and headhunter, and then I looked at my transferable skills and actually made the shift into sort of talent management and software sales. And I actually joined a very early vendor when there was about 11 employees, and we grew that business over 9 years to 700 employees and actually sold it to a private equity firm. I then sort of shifted my direction into sort of core HR and sort of HCM suite. So I worked for SAP and worked on a number of projects there, mainly within financial services. And I've then found myself joining SmartRecruiters. I was the first person on the ground here at SmartRecruiters, and I'm now, as you can see on screen, currently the SVP of EMEA. Mo, can I ask you to give an introduction as well, please?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining, and thanks very much, Rob. So I'm Mo Karim. I've got 11 years background as an HR SME, and in the last 8 years, I've been focused on business transformation, predominantly independently, and I've worked for a number of different brands, organisations, both in a UK, EMEA and global context, and they have ranged from companies like the BBC, Shell, Parexel International, Network Rail, CBRE, and most recently Colliers International, which I'll be talking a bit more about today. But my projects are focused both within the HR space, but also outside of the HR space in more broader business transformation, so technology, operating models, which have also expanded to risk finance functions, as well as supporting and being a part of the executive leadership teams in most recent organisations as well. Thanks, Rob.
No problem. Okay, so before we sort of dive deeper into the transformation agenda, I want to spend a couple of minutes providing some background and context. In the last couple of years, it's become really clear that entire industries are facing disruption, with organizations like Netflix and Uber and Amazon really changing people's expectations around delivery models. And this has had a sort of a knock-on effect to talent. And you can see on screen sort of those three sort of key impacts that we're seeing, that certainly increased volatility in terms of hiring, the need for new skills and specialisms, and very much a sort of an elongated time to hire. So it's clear that this disruption's here to stay. And what about TA? Well, I've yet to see a TA function driving a digital transformation. It's quite a sad fact. But we can all agree that talent is the key differentiator for most companies, and certainly it's normally either the largest or close to largest cost on the balance sheet. So it's important that HR does evolve, and when they are looking to evolve, it has to, from my perspective. If we look at the sort of specialist area of, again, sort of talent acquisition, which is kind of my specialist background, there's really an urgent need to consolidate and integrates the wide array of tools needed for making a hire. And I'm talking about sourcing, I'm talking about social media in terms of recruitment sort of platforms, assessment tools, AI in terms of sort of machine learning and matching, job distribution, CRM, background checks, and more. And you can see a quote on screen from one of our other customers talking about the fact that it's moving away from reliant on an old HR technology to more of a myriad of solutions. And then this happens. So I'm sure it needs no introduction. We're faced with another layer of complexity and disruption. It's a market condition which is really driving a high number of changes in the way we work and even, quite frankly, exist. And the impact to talent is high, and it's also compounding the problems that I listed earlier. So we are seeing, extreme shifts in hiring. We're seeing recruitment freezes. We're also seeing, recruitment frenzies with organizations like Amazon, looking to hire 100,000 people in the last month. Tesco here in the UK hiring 20,000 people to hire this sort of unprecedented sort of level of demand that they're experiencing. Aldi hiring 9,000, and the list goes on. And we're all having to learn new skills. And for those of you who aren't familiar with working from home, it takes a certain mindset. A lot of people are having to shift to doing web meetings, and the entire engagement model really for companies changed overnight. So if you're a face-to-face sort of somebody's working face-to-face, I mean, that's obviously been removed with social distancing. And as for the time to hire, for some companies, it's now. So don't assume that it's becoming easier due to the other extreme of layoffs. Some of the companies that we speak to are reporting a drop in candidate volumes. And it's clear that the priorities for companies need to be quickly addressed and set now. So I'm just going to pause now for a poll and hand over to Sophie.
Yes, fantastic. So we're just going to, we've just launched a poll, just essentially to see where your current priorities are lying at the moment. So the question is, what are your current priorities? There are 5 different options, which include the response to COVID-19 internally. So those are sorts of things like communication and planning, management or redeployment of staff internally, a shift in hiring skills in response to external, changing your IT, HR stack to anticipate future needs, or essentially continuing business as usual. So I'll just give you guys about 30 seconds to cast your votes. Votes. Just give you a few more seconds. Okay, so what we'll do now is if we just close the poll and then we'll share the results. So as you can see, pretty much half of people at the moment are responding to internal COVID-19 pandemic, things like communication sort of things. And the second most popular choice with 19% was the redeployment of staff internally. Rob, what are your thoughts on the results, considering that so many people have said that they are currently responding to COVID-19?
Yeah, it's to be expected. I think that some businesses were very quick out of the gates in terms of replanning. Some other organisations, I think, were a little bit complacent. If I just talk personally from our perspective here at SmartRecruiters, and we're in the relative fortunate position that the majority of our workforce already worked from home. We're a technology business, so we're used to crossing borders and doing things internationally. We started our COVID planning about 6 weeks ago, and it's been a huge focus for us to ensure that we're supporting our employees, to ensure that we're giving back to the community that we support with tools and training. And we launched a masterclass program and did a number of sort of initiatives. But it's been a huge a huge investment for time for the organisation. So from my perspective, this poll feedback is absolutely aligned with what I'm seeing.
Fantastic. And now we can continue with the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks everybody for your feedback. It's really nice to have this sort of interaction and to get a pulse check from those of you on the line. So, we talked about the pandemic. We talked about, the impact and the conditions that we're all currently now facing. And of course, you've just reiterated that a huge amount of time is going into replanning. But this replanning and this COVID situation, I think presents an opportunity. Whilst we operate in a new and uncertain world for a lot of us, it's not the first time that we've been faced by such adverse conditions. And this quote on screen from Albert Einstein, I think gives us sort of pause for reflection. We didn't choose to be in this situation, that's very clear, but we can choose how we respond. So, it turns out for HR leaders that there's a lot that we can be doing right now. There's a lot of discussion around, an investment in transformation. Organizations are having to look very closely at their processes and the people they have in their teams and the tools. A lot of organizations are either preparing for significant change in their business model and restructuring, but other organizations are taking this time to position themselves and get ready for the upswing with a sort of a bulletproof strategy moving forward. And I think in terms of sort of strategies, now's the time to think about, particularly in terms of recruitment, what is the strategy for the future? I mean, this is a fairly easy one to sort of talk about here. A lot of things have changed. A lot of companies are already thinking about transitioning from reactive to proactive. Now's certainly the time to build relationships and put in place the drivers for efficiency. And unfortunately, in many cases, the organizations that we speak to, the technology stacks that are used by organizations have to change. Many organizations didn't have video interviewing in place prior to the crisis. So, they're having to look at, bringing in scalable solutions to meet new ways of working. For those organizations who perhaps have been working extensively, hiring a lot of people, how do they now manage this talent pool that they've built of people they can't hire? Equally, other organizations are looking to hire, as I've quoted earlier, at a very high rate. So, many tools are not designed to enable organizations to really collaborate and sort of remove the silos, because now more than ever, we need to have a good line of sight across what's doing. And certainly for the recruitment function, they need to find a way of doing more with less and adding more value to the business. And I think that this is a time more than ever that HR can step up and really align to business objectives. It's about taking a really good look about how you as HR leaders can help solve the talent problems that are keeping your CEO up at night. And for TA, for those recruiters and the talent acquisition function, it's about ensuring that they evolve to more than just a hiring service. So let's talk about transformation now. And I'm going to be asking Mo some questions, and we're going to be talking about some real case studies and experiences from Mo. I mean, he's a transformation practitioner. I actually met Mo 2 years ago when he joined Colliers with a clear transformation mandate, and part of that transformation was the technology vendor. So I'm pleased to say that Colliers selected SmartRecruiters to be their very first ATS in EMEA. So Mo, if I can hand over to you, why don't you expand on the story a little?
Yeah, sure. So look, for those of you who don't know, and this was one of the challenges that I came in to try and address for Colliers, which was Colliers is the fastest growing real estate company in the world and the third largest. Now, a lot of people just didn't know that, and some of the challenges that business was facing was around, how do we put a strategy in place that can attract, engage, and retain talent? And that challenge was from the very desk of the CEO and the board in EMEA. I was tasked with the role of putting together a people strategy that would exactly address, attracting, engaging, and retaining talent. And more importantly, the business is going on a journey of growth, and the real estate market in particular is a small community of professionals, and it's a very tough to get talent and keep talent. And I think companies that are successful with that are those that can demonstrate an EVP, a strong brand, but most importantly have a direct sourcing channel. So the problem I faced at Colliers was there was no sort of in-house recruitment team centralized in EMEA. Things were being done locally. There was no technology at the heart of it. There was no common thread around investments in social media, and no real strategy in particular around talent acquisition. So the first part of the three-part story of attract, engage, and retain that I sought to address was attract. And for me, that's talent acquisition sitting at the heart of, if your organization is on a growth strategy and a growth agenda, you've got to be able to address how you're bringing talent in to your business. So I set about literally looking at the competitor landscape, what competitors were doing, and trying to understand opportunities and challenges within EMEA at Colliers. So looking at past expenditure, how the business was recruiting previously, and also drawing out a picture for the CEO and the board around, here are some options for you, but here's also the risk of standing still. And for me, it was about the board and the CEO understanding what it would actually take to be successful in a talent acquisition specific transformation as part of the wider people transformation journey. So I set about putting a strategy together that has 4 key pillars. And for me, when you're building certainly an in-house talent acquisition function, it starts with securing the very best team of recruiters that you can, going out, finding out who they are, where they work, and selling them the story of come and join the Colliers journey and story to build something really fantastic, in having a great EMEA. And that's hadn't been done yet in a number of the competitor firms. Secondly, it was about technology, and technology drives the ability to be more productive. You saw a slide earlier around reactive, proactive, predictive, but for me it started at the point of getting some sort of technology in place that would allow the recruiters to build a pipeline of talent for the business and automate a number of manual processes, stepping away from Excel, but more than anything, driving adoption of that technology through its ease of use, intuitive nature, and being a tool that not just that the TA teams would be using. So a key metric for me was around adoption with hiring managers. So, reducing hiring manager time spent on recruitment, to allowing them to, drive their business units forward, and, getting the value out of the technology and the recruiters. The third piece of the story for me, social media and brand. So again, it's not just LinkedIn, it's, there are other social sources out there that we should be looking at. There are the usual suspects, but what about YouTube and putting videos on YouTube around working in an organization, what it's like to be there, putting the EVP out there in different ways, looking at that social landscape and putting together a mixed strategy. And the last part of my 4-pillar strategy was ultimately, the Colliers business was heavily reliant on agencies, as many organizations are. I'm personally not in favor of cutting out agencies. I think for me, they're always a delivery partner. But I think, the successful in-house TA model, certainly that I've put together in the past and I've seen in previous organizations, are those that can also embrace a working relationship with agencies where you bring them in as a partner, you talk to them about your strategy, but ultimately, they are an extended arm. They sell your brand and your story into the market. So 4 key things for me as part of the talent acquisition piece. Now, we did look at a number of different vendors in that landscape, and that's when Rob and I met. And for me, I touched on the point around I needed a technology solution that was intuitive, easy to use, very simple, and one that hiring managers in particular would be really engaged with. And for me, looking around, there are lots of great technology vendors out there for sure, but at this moment in time for Colliers, It was great to partner with SmartRecruiters because of the user interface in particular was what the business found very, very appealing. You know, it's mobile enabled and we use it on the desktop. So as part of my overall strategy, you know, it helped me drive adoption, and it certainly helped the team I built up be successful in bringing hires into the business. And I guess, you know,
I was just going to say, Mo, if you don't mind me interjecting, you know, after go live, I remember you didn't stop optimizing, and you invested some time in a mobile exec dashboard. You know, what was the driver behind that?
What I'd say to any of you who are trying to answer this one question around the value that TA delivers for your business, take the opportunity to ask your business heads, your CEO, you know, what are the 10 key things you would like to know about talent acquisition? And even start with the basic question, do you know how many vacancies you have today? And if you're not able to answer that one fundamental, simple question, then you've got to look at how do you get those analytics in front of your CEOs? How do you answer those business questions? And the business questions can be unique for your business, but there are some really common ones. And for me, it was really important to be credible in what we were doing, to be able to support our CEO, the board, business units in the countries that we were looking after across the EMEA, the ability to track hires by country, by business unit, our split of agency usage, our split of referrals, because we wanted to drive business referrals higher, both manager referrals and employee referrals, track our expenditure, and importantly, in a fee earning business, you know, to turn the tide on the ability to actually hire fee earners and not just those within a business services function, and be able to report on that. And another key thing, you know, if you're in a growth organization, how many vacancies are you delivering on in terms of hiring people from a growth perspective versus a, you know, just replacing people? So key metrics, and this dashboard that you see in front of you was built on Power BI, and we developed this purely in-house, and it's used on the mobile phone again as well as desktop. And the business heads, including the CEO, use this tool. Key to be able to answer, you know, business questions, but, you know, find out what those business questions are.
Oh, you're still there, Mo?
I'm still there, yeah. So that's what I was going to say on that piece there. So we continued optimizing, and again, this was the key part of adoption, you know. So it's great having an in-house team, technology, LinkedIn and other social media, but if you can't demonstrate the value of, you know, all those different things in, you know, a few simple clicks, often you can lose the buy-in or the momentum. And one of the ways of securing future investment again is to keep demonstrating continued value. And again, this dashboard you see, you know, doesn't need any more than 2 or 3 clicks for, you know, the business to get, you know, really valuable information here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mo. And, you know, certainly from our perspective, we were delighted to partner with you there and support the measurable outcomes that you achieved. So that's fantastic. So let's get a bit further into the topic and take a step back from the Collier's case study. Mo, let's open up by drawing a comparison between the general financial crisis back in 2008 and, you know, and sort of COVID. You know, does it bring back some memories for you?
Yeah, really interesting question. And you know, I'm a little bit older than I may look, actually, in that, you know, I've been around for 40 years, but I do remember working through the financial crisis. And at the time, actually, I was working in the RBS group in their non-core division, which was a division that was put together to bring the bank back to profitability. And I can remember both the environment, the state the country was in during that crisis, and certainly, you know, using my expansive network to find out what was going on across, you know, numerous organizations. And I remember quite clearly, you know, lots of freezes on, you know, talent acquisition and recruitment activity. You know, I saw a huge drop in investment in technology and tools. And, you know, for me, it was interesting that, you know, post 2008 and post companies, you know, freezing those activities, I saw a huge gap emerge in the talent space, you know, from sort of 2011, 12, 13 onwards. And that's where I've really seen a growth in appetite for companies to invest in talent and talent acquisition, whereby they started realizing, actually, we've got a gap in people here. We've got a gap in, qualified professionals that are warm to, working for our brand. And they'd have to put in double effort, because of the lack of investment to grow out that talent base. And that's not just from the graduate pipeline, although that is an incredibly important pipeline for companies to invest in for sure, and looking at the next generation. But there was a big gap that emerged in the mid-career, which was, there was a huge gap in being able to attract and certainly retain those at the mid-career level, which meant that companies were having to think differently about how do you go about going and hiring those people, and you couldn't rely on reactive recruitment anymore. There's a big shift in thinking about, proactive and predictive for me from that phase. And I do think now that there have been some lessons learned, since 2008 to 2020. And yes, I appreciate, we are in a massive global pandemic, which is, different in nature. However, there are some parallels between, companies stopping to invest. But I have seen some lessons learned in that brand and value proposition are more important now than ever, because no longer can you rely on putting a requisition out there and having lots of people apply for work, because, to Rob's point, there has been a downshift in the number of people applying for jobs. And I think in this period of time, we should all be thinking about how are we, as recruiters, how are we taking this time and opportunity to build our connections, and not just LinkedIn connections. I mean, speaking to people. And I think there are people out there that are more receptive to having a telephone conversation or a Skype conversation now, from, given that, we're all working from home, than they would have been if they were in that busy office environment and, not able to commit to a conversation. So I think that's one opportunity now. But certainly being able to invest in, the brand and the employee value proposition and being proactive is really key. Talent pooling, talent pipelining. For me, it's really interesting, the whole CRM space. And let's not forget, TA for me is a commercial business function. And what I mean by that is there are huge parallels between, if you're working in an organization that is looking to work with clients, or a consumer business that is pushing products out there. Ultimately, for clients, you're trying to attract, engage, and retain clients. For consumers, you're doing the exact same thing. Talent acquisition is no different, in terms of that journey. And that's why, for me, it's a commercial arm of the business. So when you're trying to have those proactive conversations with your C-suite around the value, think about how you can draw a parallel between what your business does, and the client journey or the customer journey, and then draw that out for TA, because it really is no different, because you are acquiring talent. You're no longer recruiting, you're going out and acquiring that talent. And the same thing applies for clients. You may be using Salesforce to attract clients. These days, companies are looking at CRMs to build talent pools and attract talent. So it's a really interesting journey that we're going on, and there's definitely been a shift for me. But in order to grow, you need to invest. And whilst you may think in a downturn, nobody wants to invest. Well, what does the next couple of years for your business look like, or your industry look like? Have a think about that. And are you going to be a company that's going to be left with a gaping big hole in talent where you're not able to hire, versus you've invested in your brand, you've maybe invested in some technology that helps you ramp back up, when clients come back knocking on your door, or when consumers come back and they demand your services or your products. Are you in that place to, service that? Or are your competitors, are they going to be ahead of you? So some interesting questions there to ask yourselves and ask your business.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've heard you mention before in some of your talks is this concept of hearts and minds. Can you give us some more context about why this is important, and some examples about how perhaps you've succeeded in doing this in the past?
For me, it starts with getting into your CEO's mind. Rob, you made the statement earlier, what keeps your CEO awake at night? what are your biggest business challenges? You know, as TA leaders, you know, we could do our own SWOT analysis on the business. We could do our own pest analysis. You know, we could use those simple business tools to start thinking in our own minds, what's going on as a business, and then think about how you could engage your C-suite or your executive team or your CHRO around some of those thoughts and opportunities. And I think, you know, you don't have to wait to be asked. You know, it's about how do you formulate your ideas and thoughts, but how do you really understand what your business is going through? Speak to people across your organization in different service lines, in different departments, in different areas, but more importantly, speak to peers and colleagues outside of your immediate business and build up your knowledge base of what's going on. But have the conversation with your CEO and literally ask that question: what, you know, when it comes to people, what keeps you up at night? And when it comes to business, what keeps you up at night? And, you know, if it's the war on talent, or if it's, you know, how do you, you know, win the best clients, how do you get the best people in front of clients? You know, there's a people question there. And I think you've got to be showing your willingness to go the extra mile to present your ideas and thoughts, and, you know, do some research, but take people on the journey. You know, there are probably colleagues that you could use across other departments who are probably thinking the same thing. You know, go and find out who they are and, you know, win their hearts and minds around what you're trying to do. But ultimately for me, you know, one of my successes has been the ability to stick my neck out and be quite challenging, but also be quite thoughtful in what I'm, you know, presenting as opportunities. But if you do your research, you do your analysis, you know, I think, you know, if you're willing to have those conversations, you can go on the journey of winning hearts and minds. And, you know, those hearts and minds are going to be incredibly important if you want to secure investment to do things, you know. And sometimes you can take incremental steps, you know, to getting there. And what about saying to your CEO, you know, give me an opportunity to do one thing and let's see how that goes. You know, I think that's an important conversation.
Yeah. I was just going to interject. I mean, I remember when we first met at Colliers, you know, you had a clear goal in terms of what you were looking, you know, to achieve through the transformation, and you talked a little bit about best in class versus world class. Can you expand a little on that topic for the audience, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is a really great point. As a business transformation consultant, it's one of the kind of bedrock questions or thought journeys that I would go on when I engage a client, and that is simply, you know, asking the question to the business, you know, are you against competitors when it comes to hiring? Most of the time, a lot of companies will, you know, without going to a third party, will say we have no idea. You know, so it's about understanding, you know, the market you operate in, and what your performance is like compared to your peers. But you've got to be able to set your, you know, your benchmark with your business. So when you're going on a transformation journey and you're seeking investment, you've got to create the picture of what is, you know, becoming best in class. Who is best in class? What have they done to get there? What would it take for your organization to get there? And then thinking about what world class looks like. So you're creating a vision and understanding in the mind of your kind of stakeholders, or your C-suite, around what do these terms actually mean and why have companies been so successful in what they do? And then you can carve the steps to get there. And, you know, some companies could turn around and say, you know, look, what, we don't want to be world class, but we want to at least try and get to best in class. But it's about you having that authentic conversation backed up by evidence, and you're taking your business on a journey as well when you're having that conversation. But these are really great things to look at, you know, best in class, world class.
Thanks, Mo. Apologies for the slides. I lent on my mouse. One of the common challenges I think faced by HR professionals, and it's definitely where a lot of the people that we work with sort of ask for some support, is how to come forward with a really compelling business case. You know, often they're dependent as well on other departments such as IT, and you know, the business generally views HR as a cost center. What's your advice on how to approach change and investment?
Yeah, this is a really great question, because I think, you know, sometimes we do struggle, you know, with how do we create a commercial opportunity here and not just be seen as a cost base. Well, one of the most simple things is, if you don't have an in-house function, what is your expenditure on third-party recruitment, and what could you do from an ROI perspective if you were to build your in-house model and, you know, implement your own technology? Then you could look at things like brand. So what's the power of your brand in the external market? And if you took control of that and HR worked collaboratively with marketing, you know, what could you do for the power of the brand? But one of the things I mentioned earlier in this webinar was, for me, TA is a commercial function of the business, because, you know, there is just an absolute parallel with the consumer journey or the client journey where you're providing a service or a product. And being able to have the conversation and draw the parallel, I think, is really powerful there. And if you are looking at, you know, sort of like a growth-oriented business, you've got to be able to create the picture of what happens if you do nothing. Where will your competitors be? Where will your brand be? What's the cost of doing nothing? And that is a really powerful statement, you know, to make. And use your CFO, use your COO, use other people in the business to partner with, to work on, you know, your investment case, you know, do your modeling. But I would start there with that conversation, and flip the script. You know, you're a commercial function there to, you know, not support, but lead the business on its aspirations around people.
Great, thanks, Mo. And I think on that, you know, when I personally think about change, I think about a quote I heard years ago when I was transitioning from being a headhunter into software. And it was, you know, a real decision is measured by the fact you have taken a new action. And, you know, this question to you is, you know, often organizations are quite resistant to change. They know they need to improve or take action, but they're faced with challenges around timing and resources or risk. You know, they're risk adverse. Yeah, you know, in a couple of words, you know, how would you address this, and how do you accelerate plans for transformation?
So I think it goes back to, you know, some of the things I touched on here, which are around, you know, understand the business context that you're operating within. You know, what is the aspiration of the business? Some businesses, given COVID, may not know, but, you know, it's about teasing out those questions and trying to think about, well, what could the future look like, and how does what you're trying to do around TA, you know, how does that align, or how could that drive that conversation forward? So again, understand your business context and your environment. Use tools like PEST and SWOT. Apply it in a business context, but also apply it in a talent acquisition context. You know, understand your stakeholders, and I think you've got to make it really easy. And what I mean by that is, when you're putting your thoughts across, you do not have to write pages and pages in a business case. Start really simple. If you implement technology, what do you expect to get? If you're using social media, what are you using it for? You know, how could you trial a CEO becoming a social CEO and driving the brand? Could you sell your employee value proposition, in particular around a COVID situation where, you know, you may be a business that is actually open for business right now, but do people know that? You know, and how are you getting out there and flipping the script around? The EVP has shifted. You know, we're no longer potentially going to be in an office environment, you know, and looking at skills of the future as well. So, you know, can you be proactive around thinking about talent management, and what are the skills of the future? So relationship, you know, building from a virtual nature, becoming a self-starter, self-motivation, well-being. These are all things that are top of mind, you know, and how do you draw these conversations out, and how do you sort of bring them to your CEO and talk about some of these, you know, opportunities, but also challenges. So keep it simple. But what I would also say is, in rapidly changing environments, try and think about how you could do things fast. I don't think we're in that space of, say, 10 or 15 years ago, where you could have 5-year projects where you're implementing a new HR system. You know, I think the world has really changed now, and Rob, you'll probably remember that from, you know, on-premise systems, but, you know, going to cloud and SaaS now. So, you know, think about being agile, fast, you know, implementing quick, but, you know, ROI is really important, and your CFO is a partner there. If you can win over your CFO, you know, to secure your investment and you know, nail down what those KPIs are going to be, I think that's a good way to start.
Excellent. So, Mo, in summary, can I ask you to sort of boil down all your years of experience, perhaps to a recipe for success for HR leaders regarding transformation? I mean, what should the key takeaways from today's session be for those on the line?
I think we need to think about the business cycle. where the business is in the economic and business cycle. I think we need to think about the talent landscape and the shift in the talent landscape. EVP sits at the heart of that. How do you also win the hearts and minds of potential new talent? But when it comes to sort of stakeholder management and, you know, working with your CEO, your C-suite, etc., be bold, be compelling, be concise, demonstrate commercial savvy, expertise, have business conversations, not just HR conversations, and talk like a business professional. I think, you know, for me in particular, that's been, you know, one of my biggest recipes for success is, you know, I approach everything as a business professional first, and then I think about, you know, my HR background second, and I want to be a partner there with the C-suite. So I would definitely think about those things, and just be bold, and be entrepreneurial, and think outside the box.
Awesome. Thanks, Mo. Great advice. Really appreciate your inputs, and thanks for, you know, for sharing some of your specific experiences with everybody. SmartRecruiters, we've taken a step back and looked at things. You know, we've created a definitive guide on hiring success, which is all about what you've heard today. It's all about delivering measurable outcomes for TA leaders. You can grab your phone right now and scan the QR code, which is on the screen. I'll just give you a second to do that. And you can also see, I mean, Mo's been instrumental to also feeding into a number of the points that we encapsulate within that guide. The definitive guide is very much the how, you know, how you can achieve hiring success. The other thing I just want to show you is we've also written a book. So we're obviously incredibly it's a bestseller. We're passionate about this concept of hiring success. This book is aimed at the C-suite and is about the why. So we're delighted to see many TA leaders, endorsing this book. And in fact, just closing the loop on Collier's, Chris, their CEO, actually provided an endorsement for the cover. So thanks very much for that. I just want to use the last few minutes that we have really to hand over to Sophie to call out some of the questions. Sophie, have we got some questions which we can use the last few minutes to sort of answer for the team?
Yes, absolutely. We have. Everyone has sent in questions so far. Continue to send them in, and we will try and get through as many as we can. If because of time restrictions we aren't able to get through all of those, SmartRecruiters will be able to come back to you and answer your queries in due course. But perhaps if we start off with this one, so what advice could you give to help an organisation to organise its recruitment function to ensure that they are better placed when the recruitment freeze lifts? I don't know who wants to start off.
Yeah, Mo, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a good question, actually. So how do you organise? So I'd think about, I don't know if you have any workforce planning in place, or you have an insight into kind of any of the potential growth areas or areas where there's a lack of talent and you want to secure that. But I would start with looking at that first. I would also think about, are you going back into reactive recruitment where you're just going to be posting requisitions and sort of posting and praying that people apply, or can you think about what you can do now? So the point there is, can your recruiters in this sort of downtime that we've got go out there and have calls with potential talent, get your emails out there via LinkedIn, look at if you have got an ATS in play now, look at all the candidates that you've interviewed previously in the past couple of years, think about what they're doing now, whether they're open to a change, so you can proactively. So when your managers come back to you and say, hey, we need to go and fill these roles, you're not starting cold. You've got some leads generated. Be proactive right now. I wouldn't wait. Start getting organized right now and get your EVP out there. Get the brand out there. Start advertising what's going on out there now. Don't necessarily wait. And even if it's generic campaigns where you don't necessarily have a specific requisition, can you start pushing things out there to say, hey, we're interested in hearing from you. I think, I speak to candidates as well, in the market, and, people say to me, it would be great to know what companies, are open for business. And are you telling your candidates you're open for business?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I fully agree. I think it's all about relationship. I think now is a great time to be building relationships with those people you're going to want to engage in the future.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you both for your responses to that. But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in terms of questions. So I would just really like to thank everyone for tuning in today, and obviously a special thanks goes to Rob at SmartRecruiters and Mo, collectively
Thank
for
you.
their interesting exploration of the topic. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar in due course for any of you that want to refer back to the notes or any of the topics discussed. And if you would like any further information, please endeavour to get in touch with SmartRecruiters directly.
Please do.
As I said regarding the questions, if anyone sent in questions and they weren't able to receive an answer in real time, we will pass those questions over so that you're able to get a response to your query. But I think the last thing to say really is I hope you'll have a great afternoon, stay safe, and we look forward to welcoming you back to additional webinars in the future. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Rob.